So we do have a quorum, and I'm going to read first our statement, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening. We greatly appreciate our staff, council, and residents adapting to our teleconference format due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight's meeting will be held under Minnesota State Statute 13D.021 that permits a public body to hold a meeting via telephone or other electronic means due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For members of the public, the meeting is being live streamed on the City of Wyoming YouTube page. The Wyoming City Council meeting will be recorded as part of public record. After each agenda item as read and staff gives a report on the agenda item, I will call upon each council member individually if they have questions on that particular item. If you wish to make a motion or second a motion, please state your name first. All votes on all items will be completed by a roll call to meet the standards of the state statute 13D.021. Thank you. And with that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, the flag is in the background. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we really only have one item on our agenda, and that's the 2021 budget discussion and council priorities. Mr. Linwood, are you going to start us off?
I certainly will, Mayor. Thank you. Mayor, council members, tonight, the intent of this is that the first meeting, we kind of went through the council priorities for this next budget 2021. Ms. Lynch, Mayhem, talked about the combination of those capital accounts and how that's going to function in our long-term plan. Tonight, we actually have our department heads with us, and they'll be able to go through some of the items, the larger priority and items that they want to discuss with council in their 2021 budget. We have supplied the council with an updated 5-year CIP plan from our department heads, so that is there for your viewing, and each individual department should talk about, along with some highlights of their budget, some of those capital items as well. We'll start out with administration. We'll just kind of get it underway. I'll be handling a component of this, and then Assistant City Administrator Dumas will be talking about some other components as far as how our budget relates to parks and capital improvement. To start out, administration is, we have no changes in staffing for 2021. We do have and have had on our CIP plan for quite some time for the replacement of a city server. This is an item that is just replaced about potentially every 5 to 6 years. Right now we have a budget estimate on that of approximately $28,000 for that. The second component of this discussion tonight is council saw a quote for the first time in regards to a software called BSNA. This is a software, we had these conversations in the past with council starting last year, talking about bringing in a software that essentially is one-stop shopping for the entirety of the city and all of its departments. The BSNA software would provide fund accounting, point of sale, human resources, building department, planning and zoning, and then also to our public works for as far as when they had different things as far as water and sewer inspections, etc. Currently, the city is utilizing a software called Banyan. The software at this point, it works. We have issues with it, especially with our fund accounting, with crashes. The support is not great when we do have issues. There's only one individual really at the company, since it is a smaller company, that can provide tech support if necessary for more problematic issues. They do have other members on staff, but as far as their knowledge of the system, it is at times lacking. The other component that would play into if the city were to look at this software would be staff would propose bringing the utility billing back in-house. Currently, the city utilizes some time of an internal employee for that use for some more complex issues in our utility billing, but otherwise we contract out with Opus 21. Opus 21 provides customer service and then bill calculation and different components to the city. We continue overall staff to have some issues with Opus 21 and some of the service levels that they provide to our residents and customers, that there are some at times some issues and mistakes that are being made that staff is finding that we have to go back and correct some of those. So we think with the use of the software, obviously there's a savings not contracting with Opus 21 and bringing this back in-house. And then there would be the ability to have some more, I guess, accountability on those utility billing and actually having an actual staff person here at the city running those processes. So there's a lot to unpack there on this. So if council has any questions in regards to the software, I'm certainly would be happy to answer questions.
All right, I'll just go around. Member Luger,
I have no questions right now.
Member Schilling,
My only question would be, Rob, this BSNA, is this, I mean, this definitely looks like something that's going to help us out, I'm assuming.
I think, I think the biggest components of this is the way that we came to BSNA. It was a component of talking to other municipalities and who's using this. We really have a lot of communities that are switching to BSNA just based on their reputation and what the software brings. And I think it's something that we could utilize in the future. As far as the services that we want to provide to our residents, it would allow our building department to have a more electronic face in regards to how they process permits when they're in the field, to actually utilize pads and do correction orders on the spot. So there are some things that are advantageous. I think with some of the streamlining that would do processes, I think in the long run you would see probably a less need at times, especially in administration, for increasing in staff, just because of this, what this would bring. It would allow it at sometimes with the streamlining of this to allow staff to do other things and essentially have access for all of our departments to be able to see fund accounting or utilize their bills or the HR component. I think there is obviously a significant cost, not to make light of that. We have talked to AEM. They have done this before where they have implemented essentially a mining of the data from another program with other cities, and there is some cost to that as well. This quote, I don't think it's the end all be all. It was an initial quote that we received. We still think there's some room for that we can potentially look at trying to decrease that quote, along potentially with some of the work that AEM would do. But I think overall it would be a big step up for the city in regards to what we provide to our residents, and then to be able to utilize for staff here. I think it's something that, like I said, it would be over a period of time, but bringing the utility billing back in house and not having to actually pay Opus for that, we could look at recovering some of those costs to pay for the new software just in that utility billing. And then obviously it would be improve the performance of all our departments within the city.
Thank you. Yeah, I looked through everything. Everything looks great because I've been through a couple of these myself. So I appreciate your, thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
all right, Member Yeager, all right, Member Zerwas,
No questions.
Sorry, I was muted and I forgot I was. Madam Mayor.
okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the yearly charges beyond the initial 149,000 is about $10,000 a year?
That's correct, council member.
Okay. And how much are we paying Opus per year?
Approximately, I believe for 2018, I believe it was slightly over 30,000. And then we have maintenance contracts as well with Banyan Systems. I believe those are approximately 2,500 to 3,000, I believe, for the maintenance cost on those systems.
Okay. Are there any ancillary costs to this? Like I saw this whole thing on charts mapping.
As far as are different for the accounting components, you mean, council member?
No, I mean additional costs that's not showing up on the initial cost. Like for instance, when we hired a building and second building inspector, we needed to get him a car.
Oh, sure. Okay, I see what you're saying. I think really will be, as far as our server example, that would be an example of some of those ancillary costs. Our server, there wouldn't be any necessary changes with that. That is some due diligence in regards to see what this software package would, have to be utilized on our server. So there wouldn't be any changes there. Mr. Weck will talk about, as far as some of the actual computers that we would put in those cars that would actually communicate with the system. There would be a cost to those, and he can certainly talk about those. Last year, in his capital, he budgeted $10,000 for that software. So what we would do is we'd utilize those dollars that we use for those computers. They would be similar to what our police department uses in the squads. And based on last year, we're looking at those approximately came in around for the two of them around 8,000, and then those would be something that would, like a normal computer would probably have to be replaced every 5 to 6 years.
Are we going to also put computers in the public works trucks?
We might have a pad, but I don't think we wouldn't be looking to designate for every individual truck. Right now, Public Works does have one pad or a couple different pads that they utilize for some of their MS4 activities and locates and things like that. I think that we would probably just, it's a web-based format. So for Public Works, when they're utilizing it, I know Mr. Almgeld, and maybe he can speak to this, they did use this software in the city of Victoria where he came from. I believe it was mostly just for inspection purposes. Mr. Almgeld, is that correct? Or are there other ways that you're utilizing this for actual Public Works employees in the field?
About stormwater, we used Surface Pros. There's a violation erosion. We just have check marks, basic check marks. Then that would go back to Fred, and then Fred would have a letter. It automatically would generate a letter to send to the house builder or developer about the problems, and that's how public use it in our final inspection process. And also, of course, as my job, I use BSNA for its equipment. I can look up all the repairs that one piece of equipment had, give also more accurate detail on how much we spent to repair that vehicle over the life of the vehicle and things like that.
Okay, so basically you might give your workers a couple of pads. Unlike putting computers in like Fred was going to do. Okay.
Yes.
How long will the software transition take?
Our initial conversations with BSNA, depending upon how busy they are, but we'd probably be looking at 6 to 9 months, and that a lot of that depends upon what their workload is. I haven't had a real recent conversation with them in regarding moving that forward. That would be a conversation if we made a determination that we wanted to look at this seriously and that to what kind of time frame. But the initial, when we had conversations, was at 6 to 9 months to do a complete implementation and get it live.
Okay. If we bring the utility building back in-house, how many more employees are we going to need? I mean, I'm talking beyond 2021.
For the utility right now, we would utilize our in-staff person that right now is an administrative assistant utility billing clerk. We believe by reviewing the software that we really don't have that would really streamline a lot of the processes. So right now, I don't think that we would have any in regards to utility billing that we would need based on what we know of the software and the different things that we're putting into this. We would not be looking at adding any administrative staff. We'll probably see an uptick in phone calls for that employee, especially when utility bills go out. So we are anticipating that, but the overall use of the system, we don't believe that we'll need any other staff members to operate it at this time.
Okay. And I saw all this stuff on charts mapping. Is that part of this software or is that something different?
Which section? I'm sorry, council member, which section exactly were you referring to?
Okay, I'm trying to get down here. It's the big, the big presentation by AEM.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry, within the AEM presentation, not the BSNA.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if those were connected.
Well, and I think that's part of this discussion that we're going to be, we wanted to at least get initial feedback from the council, but Mrs. Lynch, maybe you can talk about that, but there is a mining component in the quote from BSNA, and then Abdoak and Myers has been through a few of these with other communities in regards to that transition on that data. And I think that some of those costs would potentially cancel out if we're utilizing AEM for some of these. So Ms. Lynch, would you be prepared to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically as to, you know, what would come out of the quote necessarily if we helped. We could kind of figure that out if we moved forward more. But I would say we have gone through this process specifically with other communities in regards to BSNA. Chart of accounts mapping is really just making sure that the chart of accounts, what we're putting into the new system is the best that we can provide. We don't kind of want to do garbage in, garbage out. So we'll really make sure we're looking at the chart of accounts. If anything needs to be changed, we change it beforehand so that we're working with good new account structure going forward. As well as I know from experience from bringing a city from Banyan to BSNA, there is a little bit different account structure in their new system. So some of the, you know, account numbers have to change, and we will assist in that process, as well as just helping with overall project management. So a lot of this gets very technical, and we can help, you know, kind of be the go-between between the city and the software implementers and make sure everything's on track, attend training. Although we already do have cities who use this software. One of my cities that I also work with is currently on BSNA. So even when it's implemented and BSNA is gone, we can help provide support in navigating that new system.
Okay, and is the $21,500 fee, is that a one-time fee, or is that going to be, are there yearly fees on top of that?
Nope, this is just a one-time project fee that you'll only see for this implementation.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Mr. Lewin, I do have a quick question. I do know that even though we outsource Opus 21, there are quite a few calls that still come in that result in a staff member having to take some time with that. Do you know about how much time that is, just because you're going back and forth with Opus and figuring stuff out?
Sure. I mean, there certainly are times when we still have residents that walk in. We have businesses that walk in. We do get calls specifically from residents with questions about our utility. Our one staff member, Allie, is extremely talented at kind of breaking down and problem solving issues with utility bills. We've had a lot of different complexities in the industrial park kind of going through, and we'll get requests for audits. An example for some of our accounts, Rosenbauer just had a complete audit of all their meters. The Public Works and Alley really spearheaded and went through and really kind of tried to identify where there were potentially errors in accounts or meters that maybe weren't functioning correctly or needed to be fixed or needed to be replaced. So there are definitely components of this now, even though we are, you know, currently sending this to Opus. A lot of those more simplistic things that they are able to handle, sometimes not, but usually yes. But really, Ms. Steenblock is really doing a lot of those more complex issues. So, you know, it is a component of her job, and that's why we made that position to help with these more complex and for these residents that walk in. So, you know, we would anticipate that if we did bring this back in-house, obviously more of her time would be spent on this. And like I said, especially when those bills go out, but we really think that having more control between our employee and our Public Works department will hopefully really kind of streamline the system and really try to start getting some maybe problematic accounts or issues that we've seen that are repetitive through Opus, and we really try to get those under control and really make the system work well and really try to have it be smooth operations.
So it seems like by adding this back in-house, it will, in the long run, save us money because we have that control. And Ms. Steenblock will have the tools right in front of her to be able to probably troubleshoot quicker than having to go through another company is what it sounds like.
I think so. There's some, that essentially the way that we right now, our dashboard of the Opus is, we're able to see what their service staff or their call center has put in for items or notes that they've done in the account. So a lot of the time, she might be correcting or re-looking at work that they've done. And then we're, taking work orders back or maybe working with our public works staff. So I think there is some definite streamline about having just not to have a third party and just have the communication with the staff in our city.
Okay. And then if the phone should get really busy, you do have some backup plans. I'm sure that Stacy might be able to answer the phone or whatever.
We have our accounting clerk, Stacy, is pretty well versed in Opus and how to use that. So it would be the main duty of Ms. Dienblock. But if we did, obviously if she's on calls, it's like anything when the phones get busy, we all share the phone duties and responsibilities. And if someone isn't available, we'll send a voicemail or take messages and our email information to the staff member that it's pertinent to. So we think we can make that work just fine.
I think residents might be happy to keep it local as well, right? To have somebody local that they know to talk to it. So I think that's a great idea. All right. If there are no further questions, did you want to move ahead with that, Mr. Linwood, to the next bullet point that you have?
Certainly, and I think this will be Assistant City Administrator Dumas wanted to talk a little bit about as far as how our CIP and the park system and some of the conversations that she's been having with the Park Advisory Commission in regards to some of their longer term planning and 5-year planning. So with that, Ms. Dumas, I'll let you talk on that point.
Yeah, thank you. So Mayor, members of council, on page 10 of your packet, I have a staff report that kind of outlines some of the conversation that we've been engaging with the Park Advisory Commission. At their last meeting in June, we started a conversation about really what is the long-term vision that group has for Wyoming city parks. And to really get a sense of that, we started with looking at how does that group define our current parks, and the words that they use to describe our parks currently are they're current, they're functional, they're aging, they're faded, they have a lot of potential, they're very traditional, they have picnic tables, and they have needed improvements. And then we expanded that conversation to really look at what does that group want to describe their parks as, Wyoming's parks as, in 5 years. So looking out towards the end of kind of a traditional capital improvement program 5-year plan. And the words that they wanted to describe the parks as were open, inviting, stimulating, safe, inclusive, inviting, dynamic, updated, accessible, futuristic, having variety, being unique, but really grounded in kind of traditional park services. So looking at that and kind of the framework of now versus where we want to be, looking at how our budget is currently set up, Superintendent Allenjall put together a financial analysis looking at what it would cost to replace our current playground equipment and kind of maintain our parks as is with that playground equipment in place. And if we were to plan on replacing the playground equipment over the next 20 years, that would approximate out to about $25,000 a year to maintain our current level of infrastructure in the city's park system. So $25,000 a year is a $15,000 increase from the city's current budget. And so looking at that really brings up a question for the council to consider, really with that same question of how do you see what you want the parks to be in 5 years? Is there interest in continuing the parks as they are, meaning really having an increase in that maintenance cost? Is there interest in decreasing the parks that we have, eliminating some equipment so there's less maintenance costs, or doing something different with our park system? This is really focused on playground equipment and playground maintenance, and looking at some of the things that the Park Advisory Commission was looking at. There might be interest in expanding to different types of park amenities. So We really wanted to bring this conversation to the council to get a better sense of really where are your priorities and how would you like to see financial resources towards the park allocated in years moving forward. And that's all I have.
All right. And so we'll start around the room for questions for Ms. Dumas. Member Yeager.
Okay, so the Public Works will be responsible for maintaining the playground equipment, so that's going to come out of their budget. Will they also be responsible for replacing playground equipment?
No, they wouldn't be. The replacement of the equipment would be a park budget. The maintenance items have been budgeted under Public Works, but the actually new equipment would be, you know, a park capital in regards to the actual replacement of items.
Okay, and what other projects are they, the Park Advisory Committee thinking of using their funds for?
Yeah, it was still pretty preliminary, the discussion. Some of the other items that there was interest in were some shelter upgrades. There was talk of bocce courts, as well as looking at adult exercise equipment, and in conversations specifically about playground equipment, there was interest in expanding different accessibility of playground equipment, or even equipment that maybe isn't necessarily meant for children, but maybe is something that adults could use for exercise or that seniors might be interested in utilizing. There's a really wide variety of outdoor equipment that can be used in public facilities that, whereas the equipment in Wyoming is pretty focused on children. And so I think one of the pieces of the conversation with the Park Advisory Commission was really expanding that audience of who is using the parks.
Okay. Where are we on that grant for Swenson?
We actually were going to wait. Well, this will be a council item agenda, but we were actually notified yesterday that I'm happy to report and really proud of our city staff members. It really was a team effort that we did actually receive a complete request dollar amount from the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota DNR for $165,000 towards the project at Swenson Park.
High five. That's a high five to everybody right there. Good job. How exciting is that? That's great for our community. So fabulous job, staff, and Park Board's going to be super excited. When are we telling them?
I think Assistant City Administrator Dumas will probably share that with them. I don't. We actually haven't had that conversation yet, but yeah, I think we're all pretty excited. Like I said, it really was an overall from our administrative staff to our Public Works Department to our zoning administrator and planning administrator, really a cumulative effort and collaborative effort along with WSB to get that done. So it's very competitive, and we're very happy that we were chosen for it.
So
Okay.
if they're not watching, we're hoping they're not watching and spoiling this Dumas big surprise. So Park Board, if you're watching, forget about it. Just wait until she announces it to everybody. So very exciting, very, very exciting.
Okay, and so we obviously have enough funds to match that grant, right?
Correct.
So how long is it going to take to build up the funds again so that the projects that Ms. Dumas had previously talked about, that the Park Board could afford to do that?
Well, a part of that is part of what this conversation is what is the type of investment that the council is interested in making. If there is interest in expanding the types of investments that we're making, that would likely, depending on the item, require additional investment. And so is that the direction that the council wants to go, or is there interest in just kind of maintaining our current system? Those are all kind of questions that we're really looking for some guidance on.
I think that's well said. And I think the other component, you know, we obviously receive dedication funds from parks when there's developments and, but you know, it's difficult to map in regards to lately. They've been coming in pretty often, but we don't really know. It's hard. And I think Ms. Dumas really explained it nicely in regards to what we're hoping to get some direction and input from council on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Member Schilling.
I had nothing to add.
All right, Member Luger, it's your committee, so I'm sure it's very exciting.
That's super exciting. And I was actually at this meeting and attended this meeting where we kind of had this collaborative brainstorm session of things that, things that the Park Advisory Commission would like to see in parks and things that we can do to update and kind of what that plan would be. And so, I think that's really great news. I think in terms of looking at what's in front of us tonight, again, obviously it's a council discussion of, it comes down to funds and what is the progress by which we want to start really kind of improving our parks and making them, providing access to everyone, making those, ensuring that everybody's got something that resonates with them, right? That isn't just children's play equipment and sandboxes and stuff like that. So that really we are taking an approach that where everyone's kind of interest in the recreational amenities that we have is addressed.
All right, Member Zierwas.
Yeah, I just got a couple of quick questions. Talking about the park equipment being pretty obsolete and getting old.
Mm-hmm.
And park board has $10,000 to operate on now in their budget. If that were increased, like we're talking about $15,000 more to $25,000 a year for the next 5 years, would that alleviate that problem, take care of all that equipment?
So the projections that we put together is over a 20-year span. And so all the equipment would not be replaced in 5 years, but it would allow for us to incrementally replace equipment over those 5 years. So likely replace the oldest equipment and get us on track for being able to plan for and have money to replace equipment when that lifespan really was over and the equipment is expired.
Okay, thank you. Maybe that's something we should look at.
All right. First of all, I just want to say again how excited I am. It's been a goal of mine since being an elected official to make sure that the city, including our parks, is ADA compliant, is handicapped accessible, and allows all, I don't care what age you are, to play within our city limits. So this is just kind of that first step, is having that grant. So excited to see what that brings. With that being said, I also know that many cities has at least one park that has an enclosed structure for people to have parties year round. And I know many of our residents in my neighborhood that have gone over to Hugo. I believe they have a really nice new shelter and it's enclosed. I know North St. Paul has one. So having 17 different and great parks is wonderful, but I think we are missing a shelter, and how we get that paid for, whether it's donations or it's working with the Lions or with some different groups, that's conversation for another time. But we have great parks. We do need some updating on some of these. We all know there's a park in my neighborhood that has nothing except for a park sign. So we do know there are places that could definitely upgrade, and just, we keep talking about a better quality of life and making it even better here in Wyoming. So I don't know if I want to commit to amount. I think I would like to see our numbers and where they land, but I think many of our residents do expect nice parks and different parks? And do we look at a possible increase from the 15 or the 10,000 to the 15? I don't know. We have several new developments coming in as of right now in 2021. Mr. Linwood, I believe it's 4 that are coming in.
We do have the Preserve of Comfort Lakes, the final plat, the Adlin development is a final plat, and then we have the EAW right now on the Moxness development. And then as you're aware, those of you who attended our EDA meeting on Monday, the potential for the Roars project, obviously a lot has to happen for that, but we do continue to see a lot of our developments moving forward, so that's positive.
Oh, perfect. That's great. So that's what I have to say on that. I think it's a commitment to our residents. And do we at some point in time, I think that the Park Advisory Commission is really falling into step and really kind of talking about the different ideas and things that they want. We've got a couple new members that have really energized the group. And Ms. Dumas is doing a great job as well, just kind of leading that conversation. So I happen to think, and hopefully Member Luger will feel the same way, that the Park Advisory Commission is really kind of coming into their own and visioning what residents would like as well. So definitely some things that we need to discuss further with the Park Advisory Commission and what we can do. So that's all I'm going to say to that. That was kind of wordy, but. All right. So Mr. Linwood, where would you like to go from here?
Thank you. I think that's Ms. Dumas. I think that's all for the admin department. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I do not.
I think from there we'll go to our building official and zoning administrator, Mr. Weck. Did you want to touch on a few of the items in your department?
Yeah. Sorry. I thought it was gonna be Paul, so I didn't pull my stuff up.
Maybe I skipped Paul.
No, that's okay. So as Rob was saying earlier about the building permit software, BASN, that would be one of those things on my budget to do that. And then for the comp plan on the zoning side, we received a quote for $8,700 from WSB for the comp plan completion. I think we got part of that. I still got to work with Rob, but the remainder may have to come from next year's budget. And then with that BASN, I don't have any big things to buy or anything, but I would have to get some of those tablets for out in the field and printers. So those are kind of covered in some other expenses, but that's about it.
All right. Mr. Weck, if I could just add into that, working on that comp plan, very impressed with the Planning Commission presentation yesterday and some of the very unique items. It brings us again back into the digital, or I shouldn't say back, it brings us into the digital world that people are looking at. So very interesting and unique ideas for digital world when it comes to our comp plan. So it's unfortunate not everybody's going to get to see that tonight because it was kind of exciting.
Yeah, I agree, Mayor. I agree.
All right, around the room. So Member Luker, do you have questions for the building department?
I have no questions.
All right. Member Schilling?
I have no questions.
Member Zerost?
No questions.
Member Yeager?
No questions.
All right, so there are no questions. Mr. Linwood, where would you like to proceed?
We can head towards Chief Hoppy and the Public Safety Department.
Chief Hoppy?
Make sure he's with us. Here he is. You know what? Maybe we'll. Mr. Almgel, that doesn't look like. Looks like he's. I wonder if he might be having an issue. Mr. Almgel, do you want to? We'll come back to Mr. Hoppy, and do you want to talk about Public Works?
Yes, Rob, I'll do that. So Public Works has the 3 topics tonight: staffing, capital improvement, and MS4 information. and they all go together. So I'm just going to go through them all. So since 2008 annexation, Public Works had 7 employees, including the Public Works Superintendent. The only changes in that is the lead utility operator position that was not filled whenever that was, when that job was eliminated. Public Works would like to post this job internally to match the same responsibilities as a lead street and stormwater lead operator position that we currently have. And then the other request is a full-time position. And this position can fill approximately 1,100 hours of work in our stormwater area. So our MS4 permit has requirements that we can meet. And currently we're not meeting the requirements because they've never been implemented. So these are activities such as cleaning catch basins, repairing catch basins, site walkthroughs, we talk about with BFA and that, and erosion control. These activities are not completed, again, as they have not been implemented yet. But the main issue is labor and capital has been an issue since the MS4 permit came out. We're proposing a new employee and clarification on budgeting of the surface water budget. The MS4 permit is the same as water and sewer permits issued by the state. So I gave you some information on APOs, which they would just like us to meet the requirements, and also cities that have been cited already, and just like one example. And then on the CIP, again, July 1st, I've been here a year, so some of this stuff is getting switched around as it was budgeted before I got here. And so they budgeted $150,000 for a John Deere backhoe. But now that we have the new skid loaders and stuff like that, we have discussed it through Public Works that we'd like to change it up and get a mini excavator. And then we'd like to replace our blacktop trailer that was not on the CIP until last year. We put it like 5 years out, but it's really bad shape. And then a safety grant every other year. And then we're looking at replacing the Polaris 4-wheeler, which may not cost us anything, but we just put a dollar amount in case, we haven't started discussions with Polaris or nothing. That is where we got the last one. I think it has to be returned when we're done with it. It's difficult for me to plan because we have issues out there like the Vector truck. We're going to pay I believe it's over 150,000 to jointly buy in with it, but actually the city of Wyoming does not use it very much.
Chuck, and I think, Chuck, just to stop you, can you explain that a little bit to the council in regards, and council members, just so you're aware of this, and I think this is an important point, that right now the Chisago Lakes Joint Sewer Treatment, they have a vac truck that we do have to use, but there are some caveats to that. And Chuck, maybe you can, as you were starting to explain that, go into that a little more in depth.
Yes, no problem. They have a large amount of lift stations. I believe they have 60 some. And then, so that is their on-call vehicle because they have a lift station backup. They back out the contents of the lift station. So the city of, every other city in the Chisago Lakes treatment plant jets and vacuums their sewer lines for them. But Wyoming is too large and they do not have the personnel to do that. And so the factory truck's out there and we have to return it every night. And if it takes an hour to do this, to go get it, bring it over here, use it, return it, clean it. And then so hey, you plan something for a week. Well, if they have a backup or something, it's not worth it, our time to go get it really, because you never know when you got to return it, like in the middle of the day if they have a problem. So it's just because the wastewater structure over there is very large. And so for CIP, I do not know how to budget for stuff like that. Excuse me. Because we also have stormwater that we could use the Vector truck on and potholing. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use the sewer truck from there for stormwater activities. I don't know how the agreement was set up, but we have that coming up. And for that amount of money, we could buy a trailer mounted jet vac, or if they're gonna trade in their old unit, jointly, we could get their old unit. And all of us use the old unit too. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing some stuff out there because I'm looking out for the city of Wyoming's, so.
And I think,
So all these kind of go together with stormwater, and there's a lot of work to do, and there's not a budget for it, so I'm not quite sure how we should look at this.
and I think that's a bigger a conversation, council. Well, on the jetter truck, that's something that's in that CIP plan to be replaced through the Sago Lakes Joint Sewer, and it's part of their capital plan, but it's something that, as Mr. Almgeld said, and I wasn't aware of how this was being utilized, but we might not really have access to the way we can really utilize it like some communities. So it's something that we're going to probably watch when that comes up in the year, and we're expected to pay for a component of that. But going back to the MS4 piece, right now our stormwater account essentially about breaks even for the funds that we put in right now in our stormwater rates. So I think, and I'll let Mr. Almgeld talk more, but that is a topic tonight in regards to how we want to try to fund those activities for that stormwater, because that MS4 permit now requires us to essentially maintain our systems. And if we don't maintain that permit, there are a lot of different things that can happen in regards to fines and other components. So I think, and Mr. Almgeld, I'll let you expand on that a little more, but I really think that's an important piece tonight to talk about a little more, how we want to move forward now that we have these items that we have to take care of.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, and that cuts right back to the implementation. A lot of these have not been implemented just because of the budgeting, and I think there's basically two choices: is the stormwater rates or a levy item, and it's just trying to get the information to you. I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of stuff that I put out there for for actual hard costs to would be like 180,000. I think our whole budget's 100. So I have some numbers, but again, I'm sure I'm missing stuff too, but I don't know where to start on that.
Yeah, I think Chuck is providing exactly that we're going to have these costs based on that permit. And I think Ms. Lynch, maybe if you want to talk about, I know we've had some conversations in the past with the council regards to that enterprise fund, the stormwater, and how we utilize that in regards to levying for dollars for stormwater activities, and exactly how that would work and what we can or cannot do with that.
So before we start with that, can I just interject with one thing? I think it's important for residents that may be listening or watching this later. What is an MS4? And maybe Mr. Erickson can address that, but what is the MS4? Do we have to be in it? And so they kind of understand if is there a choice to be in it or not? So just maybe just something really quick before Ms. Lynch gets kind of going on the rest of that. I think that's important for our residents to understand.
Yeah, we became an MS4 community, and that's municipal separate storm sewer systems. And so we have a system that collects stormwater throughout our community. And we became an MS4 community where we have these responsibilities once we met a certain population threshold, and the downstream water bodies had a, I'm drawing a blank on the terminology, I apologize, had a requirement that we minimize the amount of loading that we send to that, pollution loading, sediment loading, and things of that nature to those water bodies. And so we do not have a choice. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency dictates that, and we are required to comply with those rules.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in regards to funding for this surface water fund, currently the surface water fund, it is an enterprise fund, so it's similar to your water and sewer. It needs to be fully supported by user fees. It actually, since it's an enterprise fund, we're not able to levy such as a government fund. User fees need to support all of the operating and capital activity within the fund. Currently, there, you know, he has proposed CIP for these items, and it is very extensive, for a Vector truck, things of that nature. But there currently isn't any funding in the surface water fund for that. That funding comes from the surface water fee that is charged to residents. Currently, the fund is pretty much breaking even. With that, again, there's no capital in there, and there's only a small portion of a couple public works employees' time being allocated to that stormwater fund. So currently, with the current funding of user fees, there is no funding for a new employee for MS4, and then also not for any new equipment, just currently as it stands. So the really big discussion here is the user fee that is supporting this fund.
And then my question to that is the stormwater fee, that is not, maybe it is, do we collect it also, do we collect it evenly for every household, or does it depend on if you are on city services versus on well and septic in your household?
Mr. Weck, can you talk about that a little bit? I think you have calculated some of those before, how it differs between residences and lot sizes and businesses. Could you touch on that at all?
Yes, excuse me. For the residential, there's just a flat fee. On the commercial, based on either like a business or industrial, their rate is based on their acreage and then on a multiplier, basically. But for the residential, it doesn't matter what the lot size is. It's just each residential lot gets $8 per year. I hope I didn't quite catch the beginning of the question, so I hope I'm answering. If not, please let me know.
No, I think so. I think that was just that determination, how it's differed between a resident and a business, etc. There are different components that we factor into that, what that fee is. So eight for a resident, and then there are different fees for our businesses based on, I think, area and size. Correct?
Right, just on lot size itself.
Okay, so $8 a year, correct? And let me ask this question. This is maybe something we don't know yet, but typically, how often does everybody pay their $8 a year? Or because it's such a littler amount, that do people pay that, or do they wait till it's a bigger amount? And so it goes on to their property taxes, correct?
I think we have,
yes.
Yeah, there is a component of that. When the council puts our uncollected utility bills in November or December of each year to the county, there are some of those that they'll build up depending on how high we have those. Some years we've done 50. Recently, we brought that number down to 25, but there are residents that pay it. There are sometimes residents, just like their utility bills, that they don't pay it either. And then eventually it will go to taxes and we receive it. But you're correct with that small amount, that $8, it can build up essentially for 4 years without us receiving payment on it. It doesn't make up the lion's share of those utility accounts, but there is definitely some.
So the account could actually be I shouldn't say making, but having a little more in it instead of just that break even, if everybody that was having to be charged that $8 would be in that account, right? So maybe it's not a whole lot, but it would be maybe a little bit better than break even.
I would say, so even if it gets assessed to property taxes, we could still include it in revenue for the year with accounting standards. So we are considering, even if someone doesn't pay, that it is revenue going into that fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go around the room for questions. Member Yeager.
I'm going to back up to the staff increases. With this new full-time employee, are we going to be still hire the 2 winter and the 2 summer seasonal workers?
Councilman Yeager, we would still have the seasonal public or works positions because they are seasonal. And so they do all the duties like field maintenance, garbage collection, litter pickup. They help with blacktopping repairs, jobs that are, it's less expensive for the city to pay a part-time employee than a full-time employee to do the tasks that they do.
All right, but we'll still have them. Are there any plans to hire more people after 2021?
Not currently, no, not that I, says on the city grows, but I was just trying to fill in the stuff that we're not completing as of right now.
Also, you talked about your 5-year CIP plan. Was there
Yes.
supposed to be a chart in the packet with your 5-year CIP plan?
That would be it'd be inclusionary in the, there should have been a 5-year CIP plan.
Well, there's in Chuck's memo, it's a discussion of a 5-year CIP. I was wondering if there was supposed to be a chart included.
I think on page 52, is that what?
Oh, okay, that's
on the
it.
packet? I think I may be wrong.
Oh, no,
Well,
there is a little chart.
There's one for everyone CIP, so maybe we missed that as a staff and didn't, there should have been one like you normally see at this meeting, so I apologize if that wasn't inclusionary. I'm looking right now. I think Chuck has some information, but we have that normal one the council is used to seeing, so I'll certainly share that out, right? I'll share that out right now, so that I should have had that in there, so I apologize.
Okay, because when I looked at the table of contents, there was 5-year CIP, and on page 57, it's basically a 5-year road plan.
Yeah, and well, I think that was, just a whoops or communication. So no, it's
Okay.
that 5-year CIP plan should definitely be in there, but we should have had like the council's used to seeing that Excel document that we give you annually. So I'll make sure that gets out right now. It is ready to go. I'll send it out now, and I know council might need some time to digest it, but if you want to have questions on it right now, or we certainly at our next meeting we can have more discussion on it too.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, and I forgot where we left off. Member Luger?
So in terms of the MS4 requirements and tasks, what is the cost benefit analysis there? Or rather, what is, I guess if I look at it in terms of like a zero sum thing, like you only have X amount of hours that, that public work staff can be, doing task X. What is, I guess, currently, what is being kind of shuffled down the priority list, right? Like if we, like right now, if we're either choosing between either doing kind of the daily things that aren't MS4 necessarily related, and then we're at risk for, fines because we don't have enough staff or enough hours in the day to get the MS4 stuff done. What is, I guess, what is the priority right now, and what's coming secondary to that currently?
So, remember, currently, like take catch basin repairs, we're putting into street projects. We repair the storm sewer at that time. We're also like catch basin cleaning. We don't have a Vector truck or something. So the permit says like after 5 inches of rain, you're supposed to go clean the sumps out, and we don't have the equipment to do that. So that kind of stuff gets put aside. And then things like erosion control with the BSNA software will help a lot, where you have all this erosion control at the end of a project. And before Fred would give the okay on the development, we would have our checklist and then make sure all that stuff's picked up. As you drive down, you see a lot of it gets left behind, and then that's up to us to go pick it up and stuff. There's a lot of things. I'll find my sheet here. Oh, so our catch basin repairs, Usually, you do like 20 a year, but currently, we don't have the staff to go out and cement them up. And there's a lot of activities. I'll just have a sheet here. I'm kind of confused here. Let's see. Excuse me a minute. Okay. Oh yeah. So we got a pond dredging we've never talked about yet. I mean, that's a big ticket item. That'd be a project through engine. At 15,000, but we have trees and stormwater outlots, and we'll remove them out of that public works budget. Reuse water projects, we have no plan for them. They're expensive too. With developers, you kind of come up with a reuse project, maybe in a park or something. And I know that like Marcus and Hugo, the council there has wants to reuse water, so they have a hefty budget for stuff like that. Training instruction, we seem to be covered, but and then the street maintenance materials, we have $4,000 in our budget, and so when that's gone, it's gone. I mean, there's no other money for fixing any storm pipes or nothing. So the kind of stuff that's going on as far as the operation wise.
You.
All right, so member Schilling.
I had nothing to ask. I've been just listening.
All right, member Zerwas.
Same with me, just listening.
All right. And I think there were some good questions already asked. So I don't have any other further questions that I had from the start. Just so council all knows that Mr. Linwood did send out that 5-year CIP document. So
Yeah, my apologies. I just missed that in the packet. So it should have been sent out. It is ready. So certainly if council has questions, we certainly can talk about it tonight. If you have questions, I know you just received it now. So if there's questions after the fact, we're happy to answer those too. They should align with our conversations here from our staff members as they're talking about those CIP. It was more or less for reference as we talk about those tonight. So essentially what you've heard from our department heads is what is in that document.
all right. Is there anything else or will we move along to Chief Hoppy? All right. Chief Hoppy, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. I could see you last time. You just couldn't hear me.
Sounds good.
So we just have a couple initiatives for 2020 to discuss. The first one being body cams. This was something that we talked about probably 4 years ago as an initiative in the police department. And at the time, the costs, were significantly higher, double of what they are today. And as the world's changing quickly around us, body cam footage is becoming more of a standard expectation for law enforcement agencies to be able to provide for a multitude of reasons. I've had the opportunity this year to sit on a sub committee with the Chiefs Association relative to officer involved shooting work group and deadly officers in deadly encounters. And that group made up of legislators and state leaders and chiefs and community activists and whatnot have basically come up with 5 pillars to reduce deadly encounters with officers. And 2 of those pillars fit within kind of our body cam initiative. One of employee accountability, and the second with a training initiative that we utilize that body camera footage for training purposes for our officers. So it's in our 2021 budget initiatives. When we first talked about it 4 years ago, we were looking at a cost of right around $20,000 for implementation and about a $10,000 a year annual cost to operate it. Those numbers have dropped essentially in half. So we would be looking at implementation cost of about $10,000, actually probably just slightly underneath that, and an annual operating cost under a 5-year contract for about $5,300. My hope is that I should be able to reach out to some community members to possibly make the initial donation of the 10,000, but then there would be an ongoing cost in 2022 and beyond of $5,300. And those costs include not only the equipment, but they also include the data storage for body cam footage. And so that's, one of our initiatives on that. And with that body cam footage storage, it's all cloud-based. So we wouldn't be adding to our server storage for our records management system, and the evidence.com, which comes with that subscription, will actually probably help us in the data storage on our in-house servers, because we'll be able to use that online storage platform for storing all of our digital media relative to evidence. So our photographs, surveillance videos, and audio can all be stored on that cloud-based storage, which will free up space on our servers moving forward, so that we don't overload those. So that will actually probably help us with our next server purchase, of not having to buy an extensive amount of terabytes in order to store not only the raw data, the raw RMS data, but also digital footage and storage for digital evidence. So that would be the body camera discussion there. And I think I'll stand for any questions on that one before we kind of move on to the next one.
All right, around the room, we'll ask Member Yeager.
Okay. Who in the surrounding area already uses body cameras?
So Lakes area has just recently went to them. State Patrol, I believe, is running a program with them. I think most of Washington County are on body cameras. They're using a cell phone based, not necessarily an Axon based. Most of the agencies in the metro are already on those. And part of what you're going to see that comes out in these pillars is there is going to be a strong recommendation from that work group that all officers in the state of Minnesota have body cams by 2022.
Okay, but Chisago County, North Branch, Forest Lake don't have them yet, correct?
I believe Forest Lake does have them, and I know that Chisago County is in the process of implementing them as well.
Okay, thank you. When will the cameras be turned on? When you have the body cameras, when do they get turned on?
And that's definitely a great question. That policy has not yet been developed. So once we decide that we create this initiative and we decide that we're going to go down the road of body cameras, then there's a whole process for approving the policies that manage the body camera data. And those policies not only get developed internally from our organization, but they also allow the general public to weigh in on different parameters within those policies. And through that policy development, we will talk about when the cameras must be turned on, when they should or shouldn't be turned on. And so that's all part of policy development, which we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, and that would also include questions about who sees the video, who has authority to delete the video.
So most of that relative to data access is covered in state statute, relative to who can request the data, how long the data retention is for. If an individual is a subject of the data, they have a right to request the data. They also have a right to ask that it be extended beyond the normal retention periods. So all of that is clearly laid out in the statute, and our policies would be developed accordingly. And that would all be part of our process for developing those policy and having the open meetings with the community, so they clearly have an understanding of when those cameras would or would not be on and what they can or cannot do for data requests for the data.
Okay. And besides bumping up the crime analyst to full-time, are there any other ancillary costs?
The $5,300 a year, which I think I just talked about, would be the annual costs going forward to manage the system. Not only they're leased cameras through Axon, which is the vendor that also makes the taser, but it also includes the data storage.
Oh, no, I meant ancillary, not annual.
Oh, no, there would not.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Member Schilling,
I had no questions.
Member Zeroth,
I think this is a long time coming, and I'll be glad to see the police officers have these cameras, and it's a good plan.
all right, Member Luker,
I have no questions.
all right, and I have no questions either. Mr. Hoppy, did you want to go down to your next item?
Yeah, let's move on and we'll talk about the crime analyst position. Currently, we have the crime analyst position, and it's a part-time position working 24 hours a week. And I'm starting to really focus on our attrition over the next 3 years and how assignments and, who we're training on to do what, and what responsibilities fall into what positions. Bringing digital camera footage into the organization is going to cause us to have a little bit more work as far as managing that data, doing the data requests for it, having to do the read acting on them. Not only you read act a PDF, but it'll require us to read act digital footage as well on these. But probably more importantly than that is how we're going to manage our software systems and technology systems going forward. As most of you know, that's kind of a big component of what I do right now relative to software management, software implementation and development. And moving forward, we have to identify somebody within the department that's going to take that role over. And we have to start training them up to be able to do that, to manage the software onboard and offboard employees, manage the data, manage the records, manage the interfaces behind the scenes, the coding of the system, all of that, which I currently do. But like I say, I think we need to start talking about attrition and where do we put that, and who do we put that on. Our current crime analyst, I've kind of been starting to introduce her to some of that, and she really does seem to have the skills to be able to take that on and a desire to do, which I think is equally important. So as we look forward and kind of embark over that next 3 years and how we prep somebody to take over that, because it is a significant part of records management and managing police department is the data. The camera footage fits right into that position, along with what she's currently doing with managing our evidence room. That's been kind of moved over to her responsibility part-time. We share that with the investigator. Managing our impound lot, which is part of an extension of the evidence room. Now bringing in digital evidence and all of that kind of technology-based software, bringing it into one person who can manage it. Not only the onboarding, the offboarding, being able to troubleshoot it, keep the laptops up and running, doing the software updates. And so this crime analyst position is to really start taking on some of those roles and start developing that person and training them on really how to manage all of that moving forward. It's not a system that I think you can just simply hand to somebody and expect that they know how to run it. And it's definitely complex enough that it's going to take a couple of years really to train somebody on the intricate workings of it, how it's designed, how it operates, and how the data flows. Another component of that moving forward is by 2021, we have to be on NIBRS, which is a National Incident-Based Reporting System, which is a new, basically crime reporting system. We have been using CGIST in the past, and now the feds have mandated that we migrate over to a whole new system. And so for about the past year, I've been working in conjunction with Washington County and Phoenix to develop the interface to be able to move our data to a new crime, reporting system. And July 1st, we're going to start testing it, and hopefully we will be live on the system by August 1st. But again, it's another component within that technology system that we have to train somebody on how it works and how that data is moved. And so I'm identifying our current crime analyst as somebody that really does demonstrate the desire, the capability, and the willingness to do it, but it's going to require more time than the 24 hours a week that we currently have moving forward. So the proposal is to move that position full-time July 1st of 2021 and make it a permanent full-time position moving forward beyond that.
All right, we'll look for questions. Member Luker,
I have no questions.
Member Zerwas,
I have no questions.
Member Yeager,
No questions on the crime analyst, but I do have questions on the vehicles.
okay, we're not there yet.
We're not there
Member
yet.
Schilling,
I have no questions, Mayor.
okay, and I actually, just maybe one question, Mr. Hoppy, as we get more into the digital realm of police work, and we've seen all what how fast and quickly things are changing. The technology that you're looking at, I would assume would be fairly complicated. And so my question would be, as we go through this process and your crime analysis person, we're just talking hypothetically, has a leave of absence or an FMLA or moves on to another job, are you having other people cross, just look at helping with other jobs and making sure that that knowledge gets passed on to somebody else?
I've always been a big proponent of cross-pollinating information so that we don't have a linchpin in the organization. And I think that's part of what this position is designed to do. We do have a records person, Lauren Studer, who also has some knowledge of it, but just does not have the in-depth knowledge, nor do I think that she has the desire to really dive into it. It's kind of a different world, IT stuff. So training somebody internally that will hopefully be there longer than I will is the start of building that redundancy within the department, so that the next person that comes in will learn components of that as well, and that we continue to share specialties within the software with our different employees, whether it be the evidence module, whether it be the records module, whether it be the ticket writing module, but from a holistic approach on how they all interact with each other, it's important that somebody understands the whole system as a whole. So I would like to be able to say that, yeah, I have an officer or two inside that really want to learn this, but I simply don't. And so I've been trying to identify somebody that really would be willing to and has the capability and interest to do it. And this is really where that, and has the time, to be frank, because it does consume some time. And this is the most logical place to put it. And then going forward, hopefully that continues after me, that people continue to cross-pollinate and rebuild redundancy within the systems.
And do you see coming down the pike more unfunded mandates based on your experience in the committees that you are on, that there will be more unfunded mandates by the federal government and possibly the state?
Well, I know as of right now, there's 42 currently proposed police reform initiatives that are going in front of legislators in the last 2 weeks. And I'm assuming with the state of the state and the financing and some of the impacts that we have seen over the last 2 weeks relative to activities, I'm sure there's not going to be a windfall of money to fund those new initiatives or those reforms or those mandates that they will be handing out. I think a lot of those burdens are probably going to fall solely on the cities to assume, to be frank. We've seen it already with the mental health initiatives and the de-escalation initiatives. Originally, the state funded portions of those trainings, but those funds have now reached their sunset. The expectations haven't disappeared, but and the requirements exist, but the funding is. And I think you're going to see more and more of that in the near future, where there's going to be additional expectations. There's going to be significant reforms, and how those get funded, I don't think there's going to be a purse to do it. I think it's going to fall on the individual entities to fund those.
And so this position may be able to absorb some of that new mandate if it kind of correlates with the service that we'll be using?
I would probably anticipate, and I can't say this with any certainty, but I would anticipate that part of those reform initiatives that you're going to see a lot more reporting requirements on things that we currently do but don't report, and for tracking purposes and statistical data. So that crime analyst position will probably become even more valuable as we have to continue to add to that list of mandated reporting for statistical driven data that the state will use as part of monitoring these new reforms that we anticipate.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have on that. If there are no further ones, would you like to move on to the fire grass rig or a different portion?
No, we'll move right down the list. Fire grass rig, that's something that we've identified 3 years ago. It's been in our CIP moving for the last couple of years. We've funded 35,000 in 19, again 35,000 in 20 to set aside for a new grass rig. I am getting preliminary costs on those right now. We don't have a formal bid until we actually go to build it, but based on departments around us and what they paid for similar grass rigs to what we'd be looking at, those anticipated costs are going to be about $130,000 to build a new grass rig that's specifically designed for wildlife fires. And so this budget includes that final $60,000 in the capital improvement fund in order to fund the whole grass rig. The current one is a 2001 pickup truck with a slide-in unit. What we're looking at going to is a actually designed grass rig with a platform. It'll be on a 450 chassis with what we call flotation tires and a little bit of a lift so that we can get off-road with the vehicle in softer soil without getting it stuck. We're also going to be looking at using a diesel engine rather than a gas engine. It's a little bit more money, but when we're taking a vehicle off-road into a grass fire, one of the things that we deal with is the smoke, and that can have a significant impact on an aspirated engine and basically choking the engine out, which will kill it. The last thing we want is to have a $130,000 truck sitting in the middle of a grass fire with the engine won't start because it's vapor locked. So those are some of the modifications that we'd be doing, so we can carry a little bit more water through softer soil off-road with additional clearances, so we can fight wildfires a little bit more efficiently. And obviously with our geographical location, we all know what kind of wildlands we have around us. Not that we see large wildfires on a regular basis, but a 20-year piece of equipment, the probability is it will be very useful going forward.
All right, any questions? Do I need to go around the room? For those oh, Claire, I can only see you, so we will go ahead, Member Yeager.
Can this rig be used for things other than grass or wildfires?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the whole apparatus fleet that we have. Its primary function will be for putting out wildfires, but it'll also be a secondary unit for emergency, for medicals. Like for instance, if we have our first responders going on a medical and we get a second medical, that grass rig is the second response vehicle. Or if we get a major medical and we need more than 4 first responders to it, then the second response vehicle is also that grass rig. But it's also it would be used for towing the trailer to different fire scenes. So the primary use is for wildlife fires or wildland fires, excuse me. But we use all of our equipment for more than just its primary use.
Thank you.
All right, Member Zerwas, any questions?
No, I'm in favor of the truck.
Okay, Member Luger, you could just shake your head yes or no.
No questions.
All right, Member Schilling. and we'll move on from there. So, all right, Mr. Huppy, what would you like to tackle next? The fleet management?
Fleet management would be the last item I have up. It's always a popular topic of discussion.
How long have you been doing fleet management? I don't know if we can come up with any
About
more.
11 years, about 11 years.
Okay, I don't know if we have any more new questions for you, but go for it.
I think the council will be happy to hear that we will be purchasing one vehicle this year. And that vehicle will be a police SUV. It'll be assigned to the police department, and what will happen that secondarily is it will replace one of our pickup trucks, which will have approximately 50,000 miles on it. That truck will be transitioned over to the fire department as a fire command vehicle. And then the fire command vehicle, which is at 100,000 miles, that one will be auctioned off. So we're purchasing one vehicle and it'll fill two purposes.
All right, so we're gonna obviously open it up for questions. So let's go with Member Yeager.
So we're not going back to pickup trucks anymore. We're going back to SUVs.
For this cycle, we are buying SUVs. I can't say that will be, the case going forward permanently. Our goal will be to try and get both of our fire command vehicles as pickup trucks eventually. So we may purchase another pickup truck in the future, to support either the building department or to support fire department. They'll be purchased into the police department for the initial 50,000 and rotated out, but in this cycle, that is not the case.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Member Luker.
No questions.
Member Zerwas.
Yeah. How many miles is on that pickup? 50,000, you say?
Right now, it does not have 50,000, but by the time we rotate it to the fire department, I'm guessing it's going to be right around in that 50,000 mile range. So the fire department will get it with 50-some thousand on it.
Okay, then the vehicle that they're driving right now got 100,000. But where do they go with this vehicle? How many times they drive it any distance?
It's one of their command vehicles, so it's assigned to one of the 3 or 4 chiefs. So they rotate it amongst the chiefs, and that's a first responder vehicle from the chief's house to wherever the scene is. So, a fire scene or a medical scene. So those vehicles are driven, I would say probably daily around the city.
Okay. Well, you're getting 3 vehicles this year, right?
There are 3 vehicles coming this year, correct. We haven't received them yet. And I can't say when we are going to receive them, to be frank, just with the motor manufacturers, automobile manufacturers being shut down for 3 months. So yeah, we do have 3 coming this year, but for 2021, we are ordering 1 vehicle.
Okay.
All right, Member.
I'll be honest. I'm not really in favor of seeing you buy another car for next year.
Okay. All right. And any other questions with that, Councilmember Zeros?
No, that's all I have to say.
Okay. And Member Schilling?
You're gonna let me talk? Yes, okay. I'm having some internet issues here. Anytime I turn my camera on, I can't hear you guys anymore. Anyway, I had no questions on this. I'm actually fine with it. And the previous time you called on me, I actually had no questions. So
Okay, good.
it wouldn't let me unmute.
All right. I think the only thing I'm going to say, which is what I say every year, if you are a council member that has not ridden in one of the squad cars or been ridden with one of our officers, I highly recommend that you do that. Or if it's been a long time since you've done that, I highly recommend that you do ride with. I think it's a very eye-opening experience. And it very much gives you an idea of how hard those vehicles are run. So I think, like you, Chief Hoppy, that's my thing I say every year.
Appreciate that.
So, all right. If there are no, I don't think I missed everybody. If there are no further questions, I think that's your last presentation, Mr. Hoppy. The fleet management is the last one on the agenda for you.
Correct.
Okay. And then I believe then are we going to the roads? We're going to hear from Mr. Erickson.
Yes.
I think, oh, go ahead. Excuse me, go ahead.
Mr. Linwood, can you share the map, please?
Certainly will.
Page 57. So Madam Mayor, members of the council, we certainly appreciate your time at the last work session where we discussed road priorities. We looked had really a virtual road tour. We looked at the roadways, the conditions. We had photos. We had 360 video footage of the roadways, and we really came down to a number of roadways that need improvement. And we've since pared that down a little bit based on what we heard for priorities, both amongst ourselves as staff and then also as council. The previous list was much larger than this. We had a number of roads that we have eliminated just because we know we're not going to be able to fund all of the proposed road improvements. And in fact, it's potentially likely that we're not able to fund all of the roadways that are identified in the 5-year CIP that's shown on your screen here before you right now. But we did want to just take a moment to just kind of identify the roadways that we've prioritized and make sure that before we go any further with running a financial model to determine, what is allowable or what can we manage with our current funding. And we might start with that and say this is what we can do, and council may say, well, we really want to do more than that. So I think we wanted to start with this. If you recall, in 2021, we do have the first 2 blocks of East Viking going to be reconstructed as part of the sanitary sewer upsizing project in advance of the MnDOT project. And so staff just felt, we certainly get a lot of complaints, a lot of concerns regarding that stretch of East Viking there to the east. And so we looked at adding to that project. Certainly those, I think one, it would help with costs with the 2021 project, just the first 2 blocks. A little bit larger scale project might be beneficial to undertake that while we're there already. It certainly makes sense from that perspective. We certainly understand that there may be other priorities in the community that the council feels is more worthy. And so we wanted to start out by just kind of showing you what we have identified here. You can see the 2022 project, which includes really 267th, Forley, a little bit of Glen Oak. You can see that area there identified in 2022. This is one that has been a long-standing project on our capital improvements plan. It just hasn't risen to the level of being improved to this date. But we do think that's a priority. There's some drainage matters there that I know Mr. Almjad would really like us to address. And so we feel that's certainly a worthy project. I will say with the 2021 and 2023 project, that's really the rest of East Viking, both east and west of Polaris. We are looking at a potential grant. We're certainly not aware that we're going to get any funding, but there is a Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Program that we'll be meeting with the county on here later this week. And so we're hopeful that we might be able to get some significant funding. We were successful with Pioneer, as you're aware, but we're hopeful to get some significant funding that we might be able to even entertain, that is one project. Now, that's great plans, and it depends greatly upon on financing in that grant money. But I just want you to know that we are continuing to look for funding beyond just our traditional sources. And then you can see 2023, we looked, we know that our state aid balance, we're still in the hole of about $150,000. We have advanced encumbered a number of our funds for some of our projects in the past. And most recently, we did that for the Fairview Avenue project. And so we are about $150,000 in the hole. We collect a little over $400,000 to our construction account annually. We know that this year with the state has notified city engineers that there will not be any advance encumbrances allowed in the coming year. Their funds are being depleted. The gas tax dollars have dwindled significantly, and they're expecting that our accrual will be decreased by about 15%. And so we know that we don't really want to tackle Fallbrook any sooner than that. That is a state aid project, as well as Goodview Avenue, or I'm sorry, the East Viking. But we can certainly entertain a project. We certainly, if we spend money on a state aid project, we can advance encumber those funds. But we can be reimbursed for them once we do accrue funds in our state aid account. So we just can't get them advanced. We just have to front the money. And so that's something that we'd be looking at for the 2021 project. We would likely receive about $400,000 next year. So we'd have some funds to offset that, but we would need to discuss that further. And then you can see in subsequent years, we have 2024 identified as East and West Comfort. Those roadways are in very poor condition. And we know that we've talked about trying to discuss, I want to see, we updated a map, but that didn't get in the packet, and that's probably my fault. We did update this, but we have a 2025 mill and overlay. We've talked about trying to incorporate some of those mill and overlay projects. And so we have 2025, we have the Thornbrook neighborhood, we have the Hawk Meadows neighborhood. And then in that, we also did have another option for 2025, and that was really the 255th, the Goodwin, the Grafton, that whole neighborhood there as well is in very poor condition, and certainly warrants looking at as well. And it's just a matter of, how can we afford these projects? How many can we, my screen just blinked, sorry about that. So we just wanted to highlight, just to make sure, if you see anything that just jumps out at you at this map, before we go to the next step of looking at the financial model and plugging in the costs that we've developed for these projects, to just let us know if you see anything that jumps out at you, like, we really want to look at a different plan here.
All right, so Mr. Erickson, do you want me to ask council one by one if they have any questions on it?
Sure, that would be helpful. Yeah, and again, we're just looking for consensus. I know that this will be a little bit of an iterative process, and we might not be able to accomplish all of these projects, but we'll certainly come back with more detailed information once we run that model.
Okay, and I just want to, hopefully for some clarification, because there are numbers on this map, that does not mean, that does not mean that we're for sure going to be doing those on those years.
You are absolutely correct. Yeah, this is a little bit more of a process yet. We do know the first two segments of East Viking will be constructed in 2021. That's all we know at this stage. And so we're kind of working through this process. It's a good statement to state, just to make sure it's very clear. And even if we adopt a capital improvements plan, things change. And I think you're aware of a number of things that changed here not too long ago with 245th and Fondant just completely blew up, and we ended up shifting all of our projects back to address an urgent situation with a deteriorating roadway that was unsafe. And so this is a guide, and things certainly change, and we try to evaluate these annually. But at this point, we really don't know anything beyond the first two blocks of East Viking, east of 61. And so we're starting to work our way through that process. So good clarification.
Thank you. All right, Member Schilling.
I had no questions.
Member Yeager.
I see that what was previously a reconstruction are now reclamation projects, like on East Viking and then the part of East Viking east of Polaris.
Yeah, we have looked at that. We've evaluated some soil types. We've also looked at, for instance, the south side of East Viking. And we know that was not reconstructed, but it did have water main that extended down the roadway. And that pavement is about 15 years old. And so we feel that we definitely could probably save a little bit more money. Of course, if money wasn't an object, or an issue, we would certainly like to reconstruct that. But we've looked at that, and we feel we can probably save some significant money and make our money go a little bit further, given the condition of the portion that was constructed with the water main being held up as well as it has over a 15-year period. And we feel pretty good about the prospect of continuing on with that type of a reclamation type project and replacing the curb as necessary. There's a pretty significant amount of curb that would be required. And then again, we looked at that portion of East Viking, and again, we feel that, you know, a good reclamation there with some subgrade correction in areas would be probably more prudent given our limited resources with funding. So that was our plan of attack.
Okay, and the financial model you're still working on, will that also include how the bonds for this year's road project will be paid for?
It would, correct. And I think that was we kind of went through the process with council last meeting about these prioritizations to at least make sure that we had some consensus before we started trying to put these into some of those debt models to really see where we're at. But yes, it would be inclusionary of this year's project, the updated numbers, that we had a little better numbers than we originally anticipated in that. So those numbers will be a little helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, Member Luger.
No questions.
All right, and I don't have any questions as well. So we can move on from there.
I think, Mayor, I think Ms. Dumas wanted to talk a little bit about, to go along with this, just for council, the survey that she conducted, and just to give some overview on that.
All right, Ms. Dumas, are you still on? I gotta change my screen around.
Oh, sorry. Yep, I forgot to mute myself. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Following our last budget workshop on May 13th, I actually think that was a couple budget workshops ago. During that workshop, the council had reviewed a survey for the use through our platform Polko to put on our social media to get some feedback from residents in terms of our street maintenance. And we did receive 36 responses from that survey. And the questions in that survey were really kind of broken down into three main categories to kind of get feedback on specific aspects of our street maintenance program. The first section was really focusing on the condition of our roads and getting residential feedback on that. The second was looking at other factors involved in our street program, such as walkability or street lighting. And then finally, we were curious about residents' feelings about the financing for our street program. The first question that focused on the condition of the roads did emphasize that residents felt that there were needed improvements to our roads. 85% of respondents indicated that the roads were a concern for them, and indicating that they wanted the city to do more with our road maintenance. The second group of questions, really looking at those other factors, walkability and street lighting, was a little bit more varied in the responses. We had some bell curves in the responses, but we did have people indicate that there was an maybe interest or definite interest in having additional sidewalks in the community. And then the final section, looking at funding, there was a very strong interest that the city would spend more money on our road maintenance programs. We had 70% of respondents indicating they wanted us to spend more, with an additional 23% saying they might want us to spend more. And a part of the reason that we had included that maybe aspect into the responses is that it allows for some variability of kind of where your priorities, and that if certain conditions might be met, that you would support that. And to provide a little bit more perspective on what some of those considerations that people might be, we did add a question at the end that was open-ended and allowed residents to give us any additional feedback that they didn't feel like they could communicate in the survey itself. And so those responses are included in your packet. They're quite varied, and so I don't have them included in the summary, but they do also provide some specifics about residential feedback of the street. And that is all that I have on the Polko survey.
All right, around the room. Member Schilling, any questions? No, we might, Dennis, we can come back to you. Member Luger,
No questions.
Member Yeager,
No questions.
Member Zerwas.
I got some questions. I didn't get asked about the road when we were done there, so I'll ask that question now. Mark Erickson, talking about Fallbrook Avenue, is that going to be in the next 2 years or 1 year? Or have you had any thought about Fallbrook going in front of Rosenbauer?
Yes, Mr. Zerwas, Fallbrook was identified as a 2023 improvement project, so that would be, let me pull that, I have it up here. Let me verify that quick.
That is correct, Mark.
Yeah, 2023 project, correct.
Well, is that going to last that long, that road? I think it's really in bad shape.
You know,
Will
it
that
is-
be a total reconstruction?
We would look at that a little bit more closely, but I think we're probably looking at trying to do urban reclamation, so a full depth reclamation. There are portions that are urban, there are portions that are rural, and so we would likely just do a full depth reclamation, increase the bituminous section on that, as well as increase that aggregate by that reclamation process. And so we
Okay.
likely would not do a full reconstruction on that, but it would be something that we would verify and confirm through that feasibility study what we intend. But that's what we believe would be the appropriate fix at this stage.
Okay, when is the project across the freeway going to start?
That is scheduled. We have a pre-construction meeting scheduled for next Friday, so a week from Friday. And they anticipate starting at the very end of June or the early part of July. And they feel that they're actually going to be completed. They're going to have multiple crews on that project. And so they feel that they're actually going to be completed, at least preliminary, what they're telling me is mid-September. So they're really going to hit it pretty hard once they get on site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, who
That's
did
all
I
I have.
miss? All right. Member Yeager, did I miss you?
No, I said no questions.
Okay, all right, sorry. I think it's very interesting. This is probably one of those surveys that people have really spoken strongly about. So I find that very interesting and definitely things for council to look into and see how we can do better. So I think it's a lot to digest when it comes to that. I think we all know that for years and years, and maybe I could add 5 more years onto that, our roads were not kept up, and I don't know if I want to use the word kept up, but the ability to be able to fix the roads, and that's why a lot of them are not in the best shape. I would also say that living in the township, which is now the city, and the township paved the roads, there were definitely different standards on how the township paved versus, I believe, how the city did. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that. Mr. Erickson can maybe, or Mr. Linwood could talk about that. But it's very interesting to see the comments. And at some point in time, we really need to kind of look at that and maybe do a little more community engagement on what they're all talking about and how we can continue to pay for mill and overlays and maybe kind of settle some of the feelings down, because they are very strong and we need to listen to those.
And I can certainly address the comment with regards to standards or lack of standards that were prevalent back in, 80s, 90s even. But we have a very strong roadway standard that we've had in place for many, many years. And so we're very confident that the roadways that are being constructed today are not going to perform as poorly as those in previous years back again decades ago. But certainly the standards that exist today are much better, and expect that these roadways are going to last much longer than those that were previously constructed.
Okay, perfect. All right, Ms. Dumas, again, I think these surveys are extremely important. And especially now because we can't get out and talk to the residents like we would, right? So I find them very, very valuable to be reading through these. All right, Mr. Linwood, are you next?
I think, I don't know, if council and everything else, the next piece will be Assistant City Administrator Dumas to talk a little bit more about equity and inclusion initiatives.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so looking at equity and inclusion at our last budget workshop, this item came up. And the council asked for just some additional information about potential initiatives or programs or trainings that are available related to equity and inclusion that the city might consider looking to. So I tried to summarize some of the items that are available here, but just for some background, one of the real challenges of doing equity and inclusion work is that it's really grounded in what we don't know. And so having training is really valuable in kind of illuminating where our own blindnesses are in addressing critical gaps that can be at best exclusionary to people in our community and at worst really hurtful. And so these training opportunities are really invaluable to helping build resilience in staff and community and kind of how to recognize and address the entire spectrum of topics that can relate to equity and inclusion. One of the things that pursuing equity and inclusion work at the city can accomplish is really helping to put some emphasis behind different values that the city looks to. So really having accountability to these types of values, being able to put some measurements behind them. Again, the value of having trained staff to really address these issues. It helps to and can provide opportunities to build relationships within the community that are really, really critical in the instance that there are issues, challenges, or incidents that happen in our community. And then finally, we could also develop some data to say where our shortcomings are or where we really need to grow. That can be really helpful in identifying where the city would want to allocate resources. As I said, there's a very wide spectrum of initiatives that kind of fall under this equity and inclusion umbrella. And so getting a sense of really where the city wants to invest that time in training can be really valuable. These conversations are done in all types of communities. There are a lot of really great models, partners, and people who have organizations that have gone before us to really take on these challenges. And so we are not pioneers in this, but we are taking this on really would make the city a partner in all of these issues. Some of the impacts in the city to equity and inclusion barriers range from things like ADA accessibility, language barriers, experiences of harassment. It can prevent people from participating in everything from our online surveys to boards and commissions. And then looking at this, a part of this is, again, really trying to find out where are our gaps or where are our challenges and how can we address those. So some of the initiatives, the first one I want to point out is the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, or commonly referred to as the GARE program. There are two kind of main paths that you can pursue through the GARE program. The first is just they call it a GARE membership. It's basically a one-time training workshop that's very in-depth and kind of provides this very broad understanding about the history of race and government and how governments can influence racial equity in their communities. The second is kind of builds off of that. They call it the GARE cohort model. It's more expensive. It's a $5,000 program, and it's a one-year commitment of staff that to participate and does very in-depth review of the city's racial policies, racial impacts and partners with some mentors on finding solutions where the city can kind of work to alleviate some of the challenges that are identified through the process. One thing to note with the GARE cohort model, the GARE program itself is actually going through a transition in the Midwest. So this upcoming year, they're uncertain if they're going to actually have a cohort, but this I wanted to include as something that the council might be interested as kind of a future idea that the city might be interested in pursuing, kind of as maybe a next step or future thing to grow, to do in the future. The next item that I wanted to highlight was to institute a border commission that specifically looks at equity and inclusion work. One of the communities that has this that I wanted to highlight was the city of Delano. They have what they call a Spirit of Community Commission, which is focused on equity and inclusion work. I'm looking at some of their agendas from the past 12 months or so. Things that they have discussed include things such as nutritional services for senior citizens during COVID-19, a United Way Response and Recovery Fund, National Night Out, the census, looking at winter sidewalk snow removal, and a Citizens Academy. So I wanted to highlight this, that these topics can range a lot and really look at what is resonating in the community, where residents really want to take on some issue of equity and inclusion and really make an impact. I'm not going to read all these titles, but one thing that they also did was to have a book club. And I believe all members of the Spirit of Community Commission did read these. It was also invited for residents in the community to really create a community conversation. And whether the council was interested in having a board or commission, some type of initiative like this could also be valuable to look at really how could we create a community conversation around a topic by doing a book club. The next item that I wanted to highlight is called the IDI, or the Intercultural Development Inventory. This is a training assessment that is scientifically significant and backed with academic data that assesses individual biases. And so this is a really valuable tool in developing some data about where the skills and lack of skills of equity and inclusion in our staff and community really lie, so that we can identify where we need to do additional work or training to really support those different initiatives. So this type of program would be a workshop where we would bring in a facilitator, and they would help to administer the assessment and then also review it with the group to help understand really what are the results of that. And then finally, there's a very wide variety of equity and inclusion trainings that we can pursue. The League of Minnesota Cities has a long list of recommended trainers that specifically focus on these topics. Again, it's a wide variety of topics that fall under this umbrella. And so depending on what the council is really interested in us pursuing, we could pursue a variety of different trainings that focus on those topics. And that is my report. I'm open for questions.
All right, we will go around the room again. Let's start with Member Luger.
Well, I really appreciate having all this information provided for us tonight. I'm intrigued by a lot of these options. I'm curious about what more contacts and trainings the league might have, and kind of what those entails, like how those kind of compare to the GARE ideas. I do lean more heavily towards either the GARE membership or cohort, depending on when those are available. I think if we look at doing, and this is just my 2 cents on it. I think if we look at doing, a border commission, I kind of feel like that, like there should be like the training or like kind of like, develop, like being part of the cohort or membership or undergoing some sort of, I guess, very neutral third-party training. And then maybe considering how we as a city, form a border commission so that it can be, effective and efficient. And so that we have some kind of foundation on which to base the work.
All right. Member Schilling?
I have no questions, Mayor.
Okay. Member Zerwas?
I have no questions.
All right. And Member Yeager?
Would it be possible, do you get the opportunity to view the syllabi of the training classes? Because before we take the classes, so you know what's in them, because my concern is, and I've taken inclusion classes in the past, and in our last year's respectful workplace training, where the trainer wanted to make a point and did so by disparaging and presenting in a negative and stereotypical light the people on the East Coast, specifically from New York and New Jersey, and that I'm concerned if something like that, if there's something like that in a training class, it may come across as shaming and undermine what you're trying to do, because I found in the past that shaming builds resentment rather than understanding in the folks you're trying to reach.
Yeah, the different trainers, again, it really depends on what the training is that the council is interested in pursuing. The GARE model, for example, that is a consistent syllabus that's presented every year. And so there are cities that have gone through that in the past. If the council is interested in getting feedback from those cities, I could provide that to kind of reflect some of their experience if they have any of the concerns that you've mentioned, as well as, like you said, a outline of what is covered. I don't know if it would, the exact detail that's available for all of these, but absolutely an overview of what are the specific topics that are covered or lessons that come out of these. If the council is interested in just getting a sample of training proposals on a specific topic, I could look at that and present some options if there's a specific topic that the council is interested in pursuing.
Okay, I just don't want, like I said, what happened at the respectful workplace training, I just don't want anything like that repeated, because I think it would be counterproductive.
We definitely want to make it a positive experience.
All right, I don't have any questions. So I think you did a great job, Ms. Dumas, in presenting some different ideas for us. And again, we are living in a quickly changing world, and I think it's so important, and always have, that we include everybody in our community, and I think we do a good job with that, but we can always use more training, I think. So, all right, Mr. Linwood, is there anything else? Did we miss anything?
Mayor, I don't have anything else, unless any council members had any items that we didn't go over, anything we missed tonight, or any thoughts. Otherwise, no, I don't have anything else from the staff side.
All right, so with that, I'm just gonna, was there a question coming in?
Mayor, I wanted to bring something up. Just wanted to throw this out to the council and the staff. We're seeing an increase in emails and phone calls about junk and yards not being mowed. And, we're back in that situation where we don't have the tools in place to abate a lot of these systems. And I wanted to, start that conversation of us bringing code enforcement into the city of Wyoming. It gives you the tools you need to get things abated, taken care of. And it's an added drain on our PD right now, because they're the ones trying to deal with this most of the time. So I want to know if the council is open to me bringing a code enforcement language ordinance forward and having everybody take a look at it and see what they think. And in all honesty, I'd like to bring it forward in the next up and coming meeting if we could. So I'm just going to leave it right there and anybody ask questions or what their thoughts are on this.
All right. So Member Schilling, you're asking to have something we put on the agenda for the next budget meeting, correct, to discuss?
Well, I don't know if we need it on the budget meeting necessarily. We just need to discuss if everybody is open to this idea or we want to look at the idea. We have to start somewhere with it. So I guess I'm asking the question, when can we start talking about it? And is everybody open to the idea of talking about it?
Okay. Around the room, Member Yeager.
Okay, you can hear me. I'm not opposed to code enforcement being not being done by the police, having it done out of building and zoning or another department. My concern is the budget impact of adding more staff.
Okay. I do know that in a lot of the cities that use code enforcement, it is a self-sustaining system. Now, I don't know how that would apply in our area here with the numbers we have and the city size we have, so it'd be something we would have to take a look at.
Okay, Member Luger.
I'm in favor of talking about it. Yep.
Okay, Member Zerwas.
I'd be really in favor of it if we could do it when we start meeting back at City Hall. It's a lot easier looking stuff over there than it is talking on the phone.
It is, you're correct. All right, and you know what, I think discussion is always a good thing, and costs and variables and all that kind of stuff. I think my idea would be, Member Schilling, that if we were, and I think we should bring that up to discuss, I would like to know numbers. Exactly how many calls are we getting for code enforcement? I think those numbers would be a good thing to have as we talk about them. So I think, Mr. Linwood, if you can add that in the appropriate place.
Yeah, we can add that in the agenda for discussion. We can see what staff can pull together for that item.
Okay.
And then we'll work with Mr. Schilling if he has an ordinance that he's interested in.
Okay. That sounds great. Is there anything else? I only see Member Luger, so she's shaking her head, I believe, saying, nope, she's all good. So if nobody else is going to say anything, I think I'm just going to adjourn the meeting for the night. And it has been just over 2 hours, a lot of information. Good job, everybody, for working through things. Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Thank you, Ms. Lynch. Mr. Elmgeld, Mr. Hoppy, who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing somebody, but if I am, I apologize. It was good to see all of you, and thanks for the hard work. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.